We're absolutely thrilled to have you here, Stuart. I will now introduce you to this session's moderator. We're absolutely thrilled as well to have this session with Stephen Gators. He is the executive editor of Variety. He's been with Variety for a number of years, I think since 1994, including 5 years in London where he ran the international there. So we're thrilled to have these two gentlemen, and I will throw it over to you guys.
Thanks so much, Sarah, and thank you for having me involved in this, because this is pretty much my favorite stuff to do, because I'm a film guy first and foremost, and as you can tell, I'm kind of an international guy, and I work for these guys, and I like to think that it's a paper made by smart people, reporting on smart people, for smart people, and so we have everybody here on all those constituencies. No, I really like being able to speak with people from the industry and have a readership that is industry people. And this is one of those situations where when they asked me to do this, the reputation of these discussions at Toronto and the audience is as much a part of the discussion and at the level of the people on the stage that makes it a great pleasure. You're like our readers, and so welcome, and we'll get into it. Stuart, one question. You and I chatted a couple of days ago, and I didn't ask you this, and I didn't tell you I was going to, but I thought, I hate to do the kind of stodgy biographical thing, but what drew you into film? When and how did you develop an appetite for this sometimes troubled and troubling and confusing and difficult business?
Well, I think I was drawn into it by sort of greed, vanity.
Like the rest of us.
Naked ambition. All of those admirable human qualities.
Yes.
I actually, to give you the answer, when I was at university in England, and I was at Oxford, and I had quite a creative set of friends, and I actually, my late teens, I used to manage rock bands, and I used to manage comedians. Funnily enough, on both levels, the guys I used to basically hive off all went on to be very successful in the UK. And then...
some names?
Well, to a North American audience, they may be less well known, but on the comedian side, a number of guys who were then stand-ups went on to become quite big TV stars in the UK. A guy called Al Murray and a guy called Stuart Lee. Both went on to a lot of success. And then I managed bands in the Oxford area, and there were three good bands in Oxford at the time. The best band was managed by me. But they had a shitty name. They were called Paisley Nightmare, which is not a great name. And then there was a band called the Jennifers, who were quite talented but young. And then there was another band who were talented but a bit moody, and they didn't show up some nights, called Radiohead, who I didn't take so seriously. And then the Jennifers, funnily, became Supergrass, who definitely had their moment as well. Did very well. And Paisley Nightmare became accountants and biochemists. Although one of them played the other band for a while. So, and then I went off to, I got packed off to law school. All my friends went off and did fabulously glamorous, entertaining things. I thought, shit, I took the wrong path. So resolved to become what's commonly known as an entertainment lawyer. I did that for 4 or 5 years, and then started to get sucked back over the line and boundaries of respectability. And I went to work for the Weinstein brothers in New York. And I was there for 8 years. And
the 8 years, which is roughly half of their... the Miramax label was going for 15 years total?
I think maybe more, actually.
Maybe 20.
Yeah.
I've lost track, because I know there was the time that they were bought by Disney, which was around probably, 92 or 93?
So I was there sort of 97 to late 2004, which was, probably the golden period in some ways.
Yeah.
And I was lucky enough that I sort of went over there as junior minister without portfolio. No one quite knew what I did. And I used to sort of do what was commonly referred to as Harvey stuff, which means I'd travel with him a lot, and he'd just throw me at things. Talent stuff, marketing stuff, deal making.
Wasn't on my notes to discuss, but I think that the Weinstein Company, Miramax success was so connected to UK talent and UK projects. Was that something that you were in the midst of? It would seem knowledgeable.
Absolutely, I was the UK guy. There was an office in London. I don't know whether this is true, but I think there was something in Harvey's contract with Disney that said he could fly private as long as he took someone else with him. So I was the ballast on the flights. I at least had a relative I could visit while he was doing the real business, and so I started traveling to Europe with him a lot. And so yeah, I got flung into the middle of a lot of those fantastic Miramax relationships.
Anthony Minghella and Colin
Anthony
Baines.
Minghella and the Working Title guys, and Nick Powell and Stephen Woolley, and was involved in a lot of great movies, and then also a lot of the European stuff as well. I'd spent a lot of time in Paris and Rome, so I had a great period in my life where I was sort of in my late 20s and really living between New York and London and Paris, doing Miramax's bidding for them on different things, deal making, marketing, so forth. And then I became head of acquisitions for 3 years when I finally decided that I needed a proper job title, so I'd have something on my resume to chart some progress in life.
I'm still trying to get one of those, so I'm glad you mentioned that.
And then I became head of international sales and distribution, and realized, this is my sweet spot. This is where I belong.
This is almost like a quiz. We were trying to think of the other movie that Harvey was upset about not acquiring. Shine was the one that he was very upset about not acquiring, and there were big repercussions. Do you have any recollection of films that got away from Harvey that made him a little bit irate?
Yeah, I think so. I think it was before my watch, but I think Blair Witch Project may have caused some internal
discord.
analysis. Yep, I think. Basically anything anyone else had as a hit caused major internal recriminations.
So you actually were doing acquisitions for Harvey for 3 years. That would
3
be
years, yeah.
Oh
And that was great because we had, at that point, the company was incredibly aggressive about that. So we had a team of about, 16 or 17 people dotted around the world in London and Beijing and Sydney and so forth. And we had an appetite for anything that was good.
Yeah.
And we'll come back to that in a second, but that really was Harvey's mantra, partly through passion for all kinds of films, partly through passion to make money from any possible direction. And so that meant there was a period of time where we were actively tracking everything that was going on everywhere.
Yeah.
Which, if you love movies, is an incredible privilege.
And also you're in that unbelievable position to be funded by Disney to do things where everybody else was envious of that kind of financial backing.
That kind of financial backing, and also that kind of infrastructure, because we were, to be frank, we were, in the context of the acquisitions activity where you're competing for independent films and foreign language films, there were very few other bidders who had that, not just, Harvey and Bob's incredible passion and talent for releasing these films, but also the Disney home entertainment structure in the US, and a really powerful international sales operation, and maybe the ability to go through Disney's output deals in international territories. It was a fantastic framework to show up at somebody's front door and say, please sell me your movie with.
That's actually a good setup for talking about today, because nothing is the same today as it was in that period in the late 90s, is it?
Harvey's still pretty greedy.
Okay. Less so, more so?
I think he retains the same appetite for great movies.
I can actually confirm that, because we sat down, a couple of us at Variety sat down with Harvey a couple of days after he lost the Golden Globe Best Picture to Social Network. And I could see a fierceness in his eyes about King's Speech and his determination to not let this slip away from him, which he felt after that run that Social Network went through, culminating in the Golden Globes. Golden Globe was actually the last award that it won, and then he ran the table through the Oscars.
Right.
But he was hungry.
And what I would say is that, this isn't a session on the history of the Weinstein brothers or anything, but one thing that rubbed off on me when I was there was the competitive instinct that they had.
Yeah.
And another thing that rubbed off on me was this appetite for anything of a film nature that was high quality, that was good. And their inherent belief that if it was good, they'd find an audience for it, and they were interested. And they're two of the sort of pillars that I built my own business on, which is, unsurprisingly, one of the reasons why we have probably the most diverse slate of films of any company that does what we do, and the sort of greatest breadth to our sphere of activity. I'm really, I'm doing what I learned in the first place.
Yeah, so I'm going to try to structure this in kind of two tracks, in that looking back at this period, sort of 20 years of the independent sector, started with the explosive growth coming out of Sundance and Sex, Lies, and Videotape, and Miramax was very much a part of driving this. All the studios created boutiques. There was all that hedge fund money. There was a bubble in the world of independent film finance, just like there was in building houses. And we saw it go, and we saw it rise, and we saw the boutiques go away, and we saw it all change, and then we saw the macroeconomics of the world collapse in 2008. Where are we today in relation to that? What similarities remain? What fundamentals remain in the independent sector that you can apply from that time that you think are still in place, or what do you find significantly the same or significantly changed? Does that make sense as a question?
Yeah, it's a very wide-ranging question, but
let's try.
let me try and answer it. I think what remains the same is to put it in its most rudimentary terms, an infrastructure where there are content creators, there is a public, an end user, and there are distributors / exhibitors / broadcasters / digital platforms that need a pipeline. That's the framework we all operate within. And then more specifically within the film world, there's still movies being made. There are still distributors in every territory in the world, in every major media, who need to acquire to license those films. And they're trying to figure out ways to get the films out there efficiently and monetize them. So the basic flow is the same. To boil it down a little bit more, in my world, there is still the same framework of movies being produced outside of the studio system that are still commercially viable pieces of content. There's still a universe of overseas distributors, both independent distributors and the local distribution platforms of the studio system that need to license them. And we still buy and sell those films and try and figure out smart ways to do it.
So despite all of the dramatic changes in digitalization and all these other things that seem to be on the cusp of, the framework, the formula of the framework is essentially the same, but completely different.
Well, on the content creation side, the formula is very similar, albeit we're operating in a much more uncertain economic climate, and so the sources of funding have, in some cases, dried up, in other cases, have evolved in other directions. For us, the middlemen, the guys who finance movies and then sort of sell them on, our function really hasn't changed that much. Then for the distributors, obviously, what they're going through is a period of transition, because the old model clearly is changing now, in as much as the DVD is dwindling down and everybody is working under the presumption that the DVD revenue stream will be eventually not just replaced, but hopefully augmented by digital distribution. And everybody's trying to figure out what form that digital distribution will take, and how to most effectively monetize the content digitally. And we're in that window where it hasn't really happened yet.
That's
so
right.
It's created a caution and an uncertainty in the distribution marketplace
So in
as to
addition,
what the future holds.
in addition to the difficulties of the macroeconomics inside this industry, there's also another uncertainty, which bankers don't like uncertainty. There's an uncertainty about the basic business model of film going forward.
Right, exactly. Both, and that's something you can see at the studio level, as the studios themselves are businesses that are going through, in many cases, quite painful evolutions and transitions. And then in the independent sector, you know, they're faced with exactly the same challenges in terms of the exploitation. The economic stakes may be a little bit lower. On the other hand, they also have less sort of ancillary muscle to get through it.
Yeah.
So that creates its own problems.
And in the foreign sales piece of that puzzle, there are places that used to be very buoyant and boisterous, like Spain. Let's just look at Spain as something that in the heyday of selling to Spain, what were the market conditions, and then how would you compare them today?
Okay, well, historically, when you're trying to value what a film is worth internationally, we split it up for anyone who isn't familiar with the process, territory by territory, and you attribute a value to the sort of across all media likely license fee of that territory.
So you have a $15 million movie, and a portion of the funding for that is going to be pre-sales, and you figure out what portion and what value. If you have Machine Gun Preacher, which you saw last night, that is a picture with Gerard Butler. It has a genre. It has Mark Forster. Then what is that worth territory by territory?
Right, back of the envelope, you're saying, okay, 10% for the UK, 9% for Germany, and you go right through pretty much
10% of the production budget.
Of the production budget, and you sort of go right through the whole world, and apply these loose industry formulas. So when we did that for Spain, we would basically attribute that value based on what the distributor would pay for the theatrical rights, the television broadcast rights, and the DVD/home entertainment rights, or the video rights before that. And there was sort of a cumulative value that got us to that, what used to be sort of 4 or 5% mark for Spain. However, what's happened to the Spanish independent distributors has been sort of a double whammy. First of all, their DVD marketplace has collapsed at a quicker rate than many of the other Western economies. For various reasons, the piracy problem has completely overrun the industry. Ally that to just the general technological change. And for these distributors, they now can only attribute a much smaller value for the DVD rights.
Yes. It's all got to be theatrical and TV then.
Theatrical and TV. And bear in mind that when it comes to the theatrical release, that's usually at best a break-even scenario for these distributors because they have such significant releasing costs, which historically they try and break even from the theatrical revenues, leaving TV and DVD as the profit center.
So 2 of the 3 legs of the chair are gone.
Right, so the DVD profit center has now dropped right down. Meanwhile, the TV profit center has also dropped right down because there's been a consolidation amongst the Spanish broadcasters and also a contraction in their appetite to buy movies and therefore the pricing. And the Spanish independent distributors in particular, who don't have the luxury of a 16-picture studio-sized slate as a pipeline to negotiate TV output deals with, have become reliant upon selling their films either one by one or package by package in what is absolutely a buyer's marketplace for the broadcasters. And so therefore, the value that they'll attribute to the TV broadcast rights has shrunk incredibly. In fact, in the cases of certain films, they can't attribute any value now because they just don't know whether they'll be able to sell it, either to pay TV or free TV, which basically leaves them with a scenario where they probably have to make money on the film via the theatrical release for it to be profitable, plus some what are still quite limited digital revenues. Ipso facto, the pricing for Spain as a whole has collapsed.
How many people here know the term FIGS UK? Anybody know FIGS UK? Do you know the term? Or
No.
Oh. It's France, Italy, Germany, Spain, UK.
I've never heard that.
Yeah.
Bizarre.
So FIGS UK is a major, like when you were talking about percentages, if you talked about France, Italy, Germany, Spain, UK, what would have been the traditional percentage of financing a movie on pre-sales, just when you add up those 5?
You're looking at probably in the 35 to 40% range in the heyday of 7 or 8 years ago when the DVD boom
So,
was on.
each one of these pieces of that puzzle are incredibly significant. If we move along to Italy today, is Italy as damaged a territory? You just described Spain perfectly. I mean, I think to articulate the trouble there, how would you compare the trouble in Italy as a market?
It bit slightly later, but now Italy is pretty much afflicted by all the same problems as Spain. And there are also both economies that are struggling on a macro level, and that creates uncertainty and a lack of cash flow for these distributors as well.
And Germany and UK today have stronger economies. Are the macroeconomics of Germany and the UK keeping those territories as solid places of hope or sustenance?
To some extent, yeah. The box office is strong. The broadcast community is strong, and they're still buying movies. They're buying fewer movies, and the prices have come down. And the DVD marketplace has also tailed off there, not as dramatically, because they've managed to control the piracy to some degree. Also, there is more money available from the likes of iTunes and digital platforms there, where the marketplace is a little bit more advanced than it is in other territories.
And so that digital piece of the puzzle is growing and helping make up for some of this bad news.
On a limited basis, yeah. And then the other thing that's happening is because they are slightly stronger economies, there are more healthy distribution companies, which creates more competition for product. And so for me as a seller to them, that pushes the pricing up. It doesn't necessarily mean the individual distributors, once they've acquired the product, are as profitable as they were several years ago. They're not. The business has definitely gotten harder for them. But for the seller, the middleman, it's sort of remained relatively stable.
And if FIGS UK is about 35%, Japan by itself would be?
Japan is the twilight zone now. Japan used to be, again, in the boom days, as much as 15% of the budget of a film.
It was 10.
It was the second biggest territory in the world for the exploitation of movies. What has happened in Japan has been, first of all, a lot of the general trends we've discussed already for content exploitation have absolutely applied there. There's also been, and this isn't an unhealthy thing, but a change in audience taste, significant change in audience taste. And in Japan over the last 7 or 8 years, the appetite for local Japanese language movies has grown really significantly. And obviously the principal loser there is American movies. But overall, the real loser has been American non-studio films, which have been squeezed from what was maybe 15 to 20% of the market at one point to less than 10% of the market now. And ally that to some, again, broader economic challenges for businesses in Japan. And Japan has gone from being the most important international territory to one now, when I talk to bankers about lending against our international sales activity, and we can talk more about that, they'll, by and large, will attribute zero value to Japan.
That's why I asked the question. I spoke to a banker this morning, and I told him I was chatting with you, and he said, "Ask Stuart if some of us are hearing some things about Japan maybe bouncing back a bit, and that the price points in places like Spain and Italy, Japan, what is the status of a price point for a place like Japan?" It doesn't sound like great news.
It's rebounded. It's rebounded a little bit in the last 18 months, but only to a fraction of the levels it was once at.
And again, just to kind of explain a little bit of this line of questioning, if you're an independent filmmaker, you're trying to put a film budget together, we just described 50% in these 6 territories, 50% of the budget from foreign sales, and territory by territory, the news is not terrific. So, then we get on to things like BRIC, Brazil, Russia, India, China. I did a panel over at CinemaCon. There is some bright news there. Can we, before we all slit our wrist?
Yeah, the prevailing trend in those BRIC territories is a positive one, again, in keeping with the general economic, not in keeping with the general economic growth, in the same direction as the general economic growth, but at nowhere near the same rate. So it varies. Russia has, in the last 10 years, become what used to be a secondary market
Yes.
now is a primary market. Has probably overtaken Spain and Italy, for example, in
And
terms of its economic
what
value.
kinds of movies does that Russian market want?
They like, I have to be careful here. They like very mainstream commercial films. They like action movies and very broad romantic comedies and thrillers.
Would you say that appetite for those kinds of movies is dramatically different than what Italy wants, or is that roughly the same thing Italy wants? Because I was talking to one of the guys you know from Italy back when I was in Venice last year, and I was mentioning a movie to him, and he said, is it a big commercial movie? Because no one's buying anything except big commercial movies in Italy.
Well, you see, that is a result of the deterioration in the marketplace that we described a few minutes ago, because now these Italian distributors, they need to play safe. They can't take a chance on a movie that looks quirky or interesting or might break out. First and foremost, they're thinking, how the hell am I going to sell this to television? So only movies that are almost nailed on wide theatrical releases constitute a sensible choice in that landscape. So in the Russian marketplace, there's more money available. There's huge growth at the exhibition end. There's growth at the TV end. It's more just a reflection of the audience's taste when I talk about Russia like that. Italian audiences are very happy to watch all kinds of films, and obviously there's a great European filmmaking culture that they're a part of. In its heyday, the cooler, smarter, more successful American independent films would also perform in Italy, but much less so.
So really, again, to recap a bit, we're really talking about very conservative trends in terms of what people can buy, what they can help you finance. Very mainstream, conservative, star-driven genre movies, as opposed to that heyday of the independent sector when there were all kinds of movies being made and a lot of stuff was working.
That's absolutely correct. And of course, the obvious ramification for that is to bring this onto a broader level as to what does this mean for producers and people trying to get their movies made, is that it's harder than it ever was to get a movie that is slightly left field or art house or upscale or anything less than one of those very mainstream studio type films made. So we, as a company that also finances movies, it's easier for us to, it's an easier, safer decision for me to greenlight, for example, a $45 million Sylvester Stallone action movie than it is to say yes to a $10 million romantic drama.
Gotcha. I think we've really painted the picture of where you've come from and where the market has changed. Let's be specific now and talk about I Am Global and the pictures you're doing, and a little bit about 1840 and the logic behind the things that you're doing now. In other words, to me, it seems like, in chatting with your new partner who I just met on 1840 from Penny Black, it seems like there's a very strategic calculation in sort of the interplay between things that maybe wasn't part of the discussion 15 years ago. In other words, something like Walking with Dinosaurs or Rock of Ages, where there are other places that can make money that are just not the theatrical or home entertainment play. But rather than me tell you about I Am Global, can you tell us a little about what you're doing today and how it works in this marketplace we just described, how the logic is being driven? We talked a little on Saturday about the lessons of the market or the demands of the market and how it is driving your company.
Right. Well, we've evolved over the 4 to 5 years since the company began. We started off as a company that was almost wholly consumed with international sales, and we it seems as if we did that fairly well for a few years, and we made some money. We had some sort of breakout hits that prettied up the balance sheet, and we were lucky enough to attract the interests of a huge multinational, multi-billion-dollar corporation, Reliance, which...
The same people who helped Steven Spielberg out.
Right, their other partner, right. So Reliance took a a significant stake in the company, and as part of that, the strategic rationale for that decision by me to sell them a stake was the prospect of us now being able to evolve towards a company that doesn't just sell movies, but actually finances and greenlights them ourselves. Which obviously then leads to the question, so is there a difference between the decision of what movies to sell and what movies to finance? And unfortunately, the answer is definitely yes. I personally have an appetite for a very wide range of films, and as I explained, at the beginning of our chat, I also inherited that from my film school, Miramax. So as a sales company, we've always had a tremendous appetite for more upscale, intelligent films like Tom Ford's film A Single Man, and Religulous, which we brought here a few years ago, The Company Men, which we released earlier this year. We have an appetite for foreign language films, we have an appetite for genre films, and then obviously the broader commercial fare as well. But when making the decision what to put our own coin into, again, for the reasons I explained, we have gravitated wholly towards what I would have to describe as straight down the middle commercial propositions that I know we can still sell well internationally, even in this challenged sort of patchwork quilt of an environment. And I know we can attract, because we're not a distributor in the US, we need to also find an end user for the film there that I can attract the right level of wide release US distributor on board.
Would your life be easier or more fun if you were able to raise capital to do an entire slate rather than one picture at a time?
We have capital to do an entire slate through our own internal resources. So again, perhaps we're in the fortunate position of not having to go out to the very cautious, damaged marketplace to raise capital for production finance right now. We have, if you like, our own internal slate fund. So we'll continue to push out a pipeline of these films over the next few years. We have 3 wide releases next year, and I'm sure there'll be 3 the year after, and so forth.
Is a company like Mandate and their relationship with Lionsgate, is that a model that you look at and think having that relationship with a distributor and output deal like that would be something you would look forward to?
It's a very good question. And since we evolved into our more sort of grown-up form post the Reliance relationship, we've had a number of those discussions with major US distributors. Our current slate of films is variously positioned. We have a film at Warner Brothers, we have a film at Fox, we have 2 films at Lionsgate, and so forth. And US distribution is still the most important piece in the distribution landscape for a movie, obviously, both in terms of the sort of monetization of the film, and then also going back to the whole idea of the international sales in what is a increasingly cautious, risk-averse climate. The first question international distributors and broadcasters will normally ask is, what's going on with the film in the US? So it would certainly behoove an independent financier like us to have a degree of certainty as to what we're doing. We haven't yet made a commitment to any one distribution outlet because that is also an evolving landscape, and the pieces keep moving around the board a little bit. Plus, to be frank, we also have a parent company that has one major foothold in what I would call the studio arena, which is the partnership in DreamWorks. Right. And to be honest, this is no secret. I'm sort of waiting to see how that all evolves, probably before we make a significant commitment to anyone.
Yeah, I understand. Let's look at a specific picture and how it got put together. And I know it did very well for you. Insidious. Just give us like the case study of how Insidious started and then where it wound up for you.
Okay. Now that's not a film we had production finance into, so I should be clear on that. Okay. But it's still a fairly representative example of how the independent financing machine works. So Insidious evolved because, let's see, it goes back to, first of all, a film called Paranormal Activity, right, which we were a partner on internationally.
So obviously we're not a production partner because I think that was someone's credit card, was the production budget. you were the primary sales agent on the film, or how did
We were brought that film whilst it was going through its editing and post-production process, and before it had sort of gone out to the universe, and we had just started a label. We sell our films under different labels, as much to give the distributors, again, in this very cautious landscape, as clear an idea of where a film fits into the universe as possible. We had just started a label called Octane, which was aimed at moderately budgeted genre fare, because I felt as if that was an area of the business that was still performing pretty well. And someone brought me Paranormal Activity and said, you should see this film. I saw it last night. It scared the hell out of me. So I went and watched it on a TV set in a room and was scared. But, you know, when you watch something on your own, you don't quite know whether it's got that grip. But I was scared, but then I'm easily scared. For a guy who, you know, finances horror films, I hate them. I hate them. So I didn't know, but we thought we'd take a little chance on it and take it on, because there was definitely something there. And then what actually, just to complete the paranormal anecdote to anyone who doesn't know it, what actually happened was the film was picked up by DreamWorks for remake, not because they envisaged releasing this tiny micro-budget film. And it was sort of stalled there because DreamWorks didn't have any real intention to release the film. It was also being sold by Paramount at the time as well.
sold?
Well, they were divorcing, if you like.
Yes,
Spielberg was divorcing.
DreamWorks is being sold
DreamWorks
off.
was, was divorcing from Paramount. So it was in limbo. So in the meantime, I was with the filmmakers, what should we do? And I said, well, I think we can generate some momentum on the film through the foreign marketplace. So what we did was we, at the AFM that year, we organized a recruited screening, and we bussed in about 400 teenagers from the valley, from San Fernando Valley. We sort of clinically placed all the foreign distributors in the middle 4 rows. And we played the movie, and we let its sort of mayhem unfold, and it was sort of a legendary night of bidding wars in the international community, and we sold the movie all over the world, and it sort of made what was now the new owner of the film, Paramount, because they kept it as part of the divorce, take notice. It still took them several more months to devise a campaign, but that's where it all got rolling. Anyway, as we know, Paranormal went on to become a huge box office success. I developed a relationship with the filmmaker Aaron Pelly and also his producing partner Jason Blum, a former Miramax colleague of mine. And at the same time, there's a Canadian distribution and financing company, Alliance, who I have a very close relationship. The COO of Alliance is a former Miramax colleague of mine. And they were thinking about trying to make a deal with Jason Blum and Aaron Pelly to produce more scary movies. We made an output deal with that venture to handle the international on those films. And Insidious was the first film to come out from under that label. So that's how it ended up in our hands.
And the budget on Insidious roughly was?
Small.
Small? And did about 50 US?
54 US, it's on track to do about 100 worldwide, which for a movie that cost a couple of $1 million is good business for everybody. Yeah. And we've been involved in a series of those with the Alliance guys, or that we've financed ourselves since. That's one of the areas in the business that is still highly profitable, providing you're making theatrical caliber scary movies. The marketplace for the sort of the straight to DVD genre film, which there was a glut of for years, is.
But it must be crazy to try to figure out which is which. I mean, because paranormal. If you look at it from the outside, and I've rented a couple of the kind of Paranormal Activity knockoffs that are straight to DVD, for me it would be very difficult as an acquisitions person or a marketing person to figure out what's straight to DVD and what's theatrical. So.
Right, and as I said, when I saw Paranormal in a room on a TV on my own, I was in two minds. I took a chance because on a gut level I thought there was something there, but I could just as easily have said, nah, let's not do it. And that was the outlier, that film. In truth, on the films we've been involved with subsequently, the model has been to still make them at that very moderate budget level, because with audiences for genre films, which is basically college kids and young 20-somethings on the whole, they're not so concerned about movie stars. They're not so concerned about production values. What they're concerned about is the visceral experience. It's the ride. And so what that means is you can make these films very effectively for a moderate budget, provided, you know, the basic storytelling is there, the basic scary stuff is there, which of course is easier said than done. But what we've subsequently done, and what Jason has also subsequently done, is gravitate towards quite established genre filmmakers who probably could get their films made for much more money, but offer them the opportunity to make the film with a very high degree of creative freedom for a moderate budget. And there's the genre world is a world where there is a lot less snobbishness amongst the directors about A-list talent or about production values and so forth, because they know their audience. And so we did Insidious with James Wan, who directed Saw. The same team is going to production on a film with Scott Derrickson, who did the Exorcism of Emily Rose, this week. Again, for a moderate budget. The same team is doing a Rob Zombie movie in October. We, I Am Global, are about to announce tomorrow a movie with Daniel Stam, again, very well-established young genre director, which is a remake of a Thai film. So that's, again, you have to have something that gives you a degree of confidence in the theatrical caliber of the film, but then once you can do that, they can be very lucrative.
I want to ask one more question and then open it up to the audience. But Walking with Dinosaurs, Rock of Ages, 1840, that would seem to me to be a very different model than the one we just described. Can you describe that? Am I correct, and would you describe that model?
You are correct. We got slightly sidetracked with the genre thing because you brought up Insidious, and when we also fully finance movies like Safe, which is a Jason Statham action movie, Bullet to the Head, which is a Sly Stallone action movie, ourselves by basically writing a check for whatever we don't cover from foreign sales and soft money. And those films come to us through the agencies, often fully packaged. You know, here's the script, Sly Stallone wants to do it. Here's the director. Do you guys want to jump on board? And that's
were any of those projects part of Reliance funded development on a bunch of pictures with stars attached? Are any of these the ones that we're talking about, or are those all films that may happen in the future?
They're all things that are coming down the pipeline later. We have the ability to fully finance these films, as do Reliance, our partners. Walking with Dinosaurs is a really interesting case study, because that was that was our first departure from, if you like, the action genre, and that came to me from the BBC, which was the owner of the original TV series 10 years ago, and also the underlying rights holder of the live show, Walking with Dinosaurs, which has been a huge success. And they were basically wanted to make a feature version of it using state-of-the-art CGI and 3D technology. But being an organization that has a public service remit, they weren't really in the world of doing bigger budget feature films. And they were saying to me, can you help us make this? And where should we go? It feels like the kind of film that needs a kind of budget that needs a studio behind it. But we don't really want to go to a studio and concede all our control, because with BBC, and we care about our brand integrity and the way the dinosaurs are done and so forth. And fortunately, it wasn't too long after I had cemented my relationship with Reliance, and I said, well, I think I know where we can do this. And to me, what was attractive about that project was, first of all, it's a movie about dinosaurs. Dinosaurs movies, if they're well made, they work. Dinosaurs work. Generally, it's one of those great subjects that work everywhere in the world. Kids love dinosaurs. And it's funny how every culture sort of feels as if it's the guardian of the dinosaur culture. We found, China very much thinks it's the home of dinosaurs. North America very much thinks it's in the Middle East. So there was clearly a commercially viable movie there. Plus,
also it's pre-sold in terms of awareness. The brand has already been out there, and people know what it is.
Absolutely. Plus, we had the value of the BBC brand, which suggests a certain integrity as well on a film that has a, if you like, a paleontological, a scientific quality to it. What was super attractive about the package was, to go to your point about transmedia and so forth, that it was a subject matter and a brand that had already operated very successfully in the live show arena, in the TV arena. There were already more than 70 consumer products licensees over the last 10 years who'd successfully exploited it. And yet the feature rights were just sitting there. So obviously what you have the ability to do is hopefully make a commercially successful feature which reboots the brand and the franchise and allows you to spring off from that all of these other ancillary exploitations again. Likewise, we had a partner in the BBC which is very sophisticated on the global level at exploiting those rights in a sensitive, intelligent way. So what we had to do, what we brought to the party was an ability to value what that film should be made for, and an ability to then go out and find the distribution partners that sort of give it the platform to get out there, and then fortunately through Reliance's resources, the ability to write the check to make the film. So the film is in production. It started production a couple of months ago. James Cameron's company, Cameron Pace, just came on board to shoot the 3D. And now that the feature is underway and the train's leaving the station, we're starting to turn again towards, okay, now let's set up the reboot of the live show. Right. Let's set up these merchandising partners. Let's think if there are other forms of live performance, that whether it's semi-permanent exhibitions, whether it's stage, that we can also develop out of this.
And is the U.S. theatrical deal on that already announced? Or
Fox.
Fox is putting it.
Yeah, we did a deal with Fox.
Great. Okay, this is one of those things that sometimes happens where you have this terrible feeling of, oh my God, I could sit here and chat for 4 hours, but he would.
No one's ever said that to me before. Can I add one thing before we sort of throw it open, which is, you mentioned the Penny Black relationship,
yes,
and
please.
so
which is brand new and announced here in Toronto this week.
That's right.
Yeah.
Right. So, encouraged by our experience on working with Dinosaurs, we also looked at a project which I can't expressly name, that was under the sort of creative mentorship of Kristen Hanji, who is the creator and the director of Rock of Ages, the stage musical, who's a fabulously talented person who has all sorts of ideas for content that can translate from the stage to the big screen or vice versa, and into other platforms. And we were fortunate enough to be introduced by Kristen to the Penny Black guys, which is an early stage VC fund based in New York that by and large has invested in new media and tech companies, but is very attentively looking for ways to export the techniques and the technology from their existing investments into the broader entertainment culture. And so we got talking with the Penny Black guys and said, well, look, we feel as if we can spot these properties. We have a great nose for commercially viable content. You guys have, apart from investment capability, you also have an appetite to come on board at an early stage. So we set up the Penny Black Fund essentially to try and identify other properties like Walking with Dinosaurs or like Rock of Ages, and develop them into mainstream commercial products.
Like I said, I have so many questions, but I'm going to stop and let people ask you questions. So we have a hand up here. Is there any? There's another one there, and there's one right behind you, and one there. I feel like a bidding auction here. Why don't you stop with that gentleman right there? He's closest.
Thank you. My name is Chris Green, and I'm actually a horror genre director myself. I have a film that's now being distributed by a horror distributor from New York City, and you were talking earlier about territories, and they're showing my film right now on YouTube Rentals, which is online, but it's only available in the US. It is not available in Canada or any other territory. So you were saying how Japan and Spain, the territories, they're not making the money they used to be. Would you be able to, how do you address the problem of the people want to see the films online, they want to be able to pay the 99 cents to iTunes to download the films, but the territories are not negotiated for yet? How does your company address those issues?
That's a great question. The answer is, what you would have to do in the current climate is you would have to go out and make, on a territory-by-territory basis, licensing deals with the online platforms in each territory to get it out there. And obviously that's an area of the business that is in its infancy. Right now, it takes to go out and have this dialogue with end users in 40, 50, 60 territories is hugely time-consuming and labor consuming.
And costly.
And expensive.
Yes.
So we can do it on a film where we're licensing the theatrical rights and the TV rights and so forth. These are multi-million-dollar deals. It justifies it. It's very hard right now to focus on just digital type deals and do it in the same way. I'm pretty sure what will happen, because it started to happen on a micro level now, is these big film festivals and markets where a lot of those broader rights deals get done will continue. But as we all move towards a world where outside of the theatrical arena, the digital marketplace is pretty much everything else, we as an industry will devise ways to help sort of advertise the content without having to all go and set up and shift. It'll be done remotely. And I think the licensee entities, the end users, the Netflixes of this world and the iTunes of this world internationally will find a way to come and find product and to license it. So to a maker like you, it may be easier in a couple of years to go out and build those relationships and get your film out there on a territory by territory basis.
Also sounds like, nature abhors a vacuum. If there is actually a business opportunity there, some small person will pop up and say, I can do this cost effectively and I'll be a broker for this stuff. And I wouldn't be shocked if somebody raised their hand and said, well, that's what I'm doing, right? I mean, it makes sense that there are people that are doing this.
Right, that's correct. And right now, again, because we're in this transitional period, I think one of the things that's stymieing people doing that is that when the majority of independently made features, even lower budget features, are made, there's some kind of broader aspiration to get them out as widely as possible. So inevitably, the owner of the film sets off down the road of trying to find broader distribution, and then maybe reverts to the digital thing when they think, okay, I'm not going to get a theatrical release. What do I do? Which is, that's not the best dynamic to generate a new business model.
Right.
But increasingly, I think as the cost of filmmaking and the barrier to entry gets lower, as people make these films for less money, and they'll realize, I don't need to go through these traditional platforms. I'm just going to exploit it digitally. And hopefully, in tandem with that, there's actually an infrastructure grows up that allows them to do it.
If he were to sell his digital rights off in an important territory, could that possibly damage a deal later with somebody who would say, oh my God, I wish you had the digital rights available. I'm not as interested now. Or
it would fatally damage it, because where we currently are is because we tend to license this content for a period of years, anywhere from 5 to 25 years on a territory by territory basis. And so obviously none of us really know what the specific avenue of digital exploitation will be in, frankly, even 3 years, never mind 10 years. So these distributors who buy films from us, they need to have the full bouquet of rights in order to be confident that they can continue to exploit them. And the other thing that challenges them is that, again, because of the inequality in bargaining power now, when you are a distributor and you go to a broadcaster and want to license them the open quotes pay TV rights or the pay TV and VOD rights, the broadcaster inevitably requires a very wide sweeping definition of what digital exploitation is and gobbles it all up. So you need to give it away.
Okay. I think you had your hand up first.
Ada Vaughan from Stable Films. Actually, it's almost like an extension of his question. I specialize in high concept film, and one of my film is a musical sci-fi, and the underlying theme is environmental. So there are groups that want to tie onto the project, so they are looking at everything that is environmentally sound. So I was planning to have, instead of using DVD profit stream, I thought maybe the downloading, which is the iPhone, go through the iPhone, iTunes and all that jazz. And I was wondering, will that cover the DVD sales? And like you said just now, that would destroy the other part of the profit.
So if I can rephrase the question, I think what you're asking is, will these new digital platforms at some point make up for the DVD going away?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, I think that's...
Yeah.
I think they'll make up for it in terms of the model. Yeah, they will. The question is, again, it's the evolution of, if you mean, will I negate my ability to then get my film out on DVD because I gave the sort of digital or mobile rights to whoever put up the money? You might do, because again, going back to what I said before, right now in this period of uncertainty as to what the future holds, everybody's trying to bundle up as wide a range of rights as possible. So if I'm a mobile content provider who's looking to acquire or finance product from a third party, I'm probably going to say you're going to license me not just the digital rights, but all forms of home entertainment rights or something, and take the DVD.
Yeah, because they have learned over the past, especially the past 10 years, they'd better have a broad definition because new ways of distributing are popping up. So, Mark?
Hi, Mark Rabinowitz with CNN, and I'm also a producer. In the go-go days of the 90s, there were all sorts of development deals and overhead deals and three-picture deals, this, that, and the other, going around, and there's been sort of mumbling that development money is coming back, but I'm afraid the answer to this question is a one-word one, but is there any development money out there at all?
Well, Reliance was putting up development money for stuff, right? With you. But with stars attached. It was CAA.
Yeah, they're giving it to Imagine and
Yeah.
Christopher Columbus, who probably need it less than the average independent producer on the ground. The truth is, there is less and less development money out there. Two reasons. One, the studios are trying to cut back on development and are commissioning less and basically spending less on development themselves. Secondly, and I have to confess to being part of the malaise here, as the second tier below the studios, the people who can write a check for an independently financed film, we don't need to develop much because there's so many projects out there that are ready.
Supply and demand.
Exactly, and so we're all caught in that situation. Of course, it's lovely if you can find something at the seed stage and nurture it, but from a hard business perspective, it's also a high-risk strategy.
In a word, no. There's a gentleman, a very determined gentleman standing up with his hand up.
Hi, my name is Hector Echavarria. I'm a producer from Argentina. Thank you so much for giving me the chance. I'm sorry about my accent. The question is this. I have a movie called No Way Out that I'm producing.
Yeah.
I have Ray Liotta, Gary Oldman, Paz Vega, Stella Warren, Christopher Lambert.
Okay.
It's a $4.5 million. I have 75% of the budget already confirmed. I have the two pictures. One is a $10 million. I have.
Okay, what is the question? Because
the question is, can I get your business card so I can send you the information?
I had a feeling that was the question.
And you won't regret it.
I think give someone your business card.
That's fine. Yeah, of course.
Thank you so much. Thank you.
In the back, while you're still back there.
Hi, my name's Adam Bradley. A couple of the trends that you've been talking about, the technological trend and the current economic climate, to what extent do you think that these are flashes in the pan and will revert back to, let's say, the more traditional economic climate? And to what extent do you think these changes are here to stay and this is the way the world is and we need to get used to it?
I think your first question is very broad, and is the world economy going to improve? I hope so. Is the U.S. economy going to improve? I hope so. I don't know. We're here to have that discussion.
Yeah, it's also a strange day to have it because I started this morning by watching CNN about the entire banking sector of the UK going through the biggest upheaval. Well, BBC said in decades, perhaps in history. So it's clearly a bigger subject. Right. Another question? We have a lady right here.
Hi, Stuart. Thank you for your comments. Sherry Souls. Do you currently put on your budget sheet the new media, online, mobile, as a component of distribution and or as a marketing component?
Distribution and marketing are essentially one and the same. So we don't distribute. Of course, we license to end users. If you ask me, does the studio, when they present me with the P&L for the release of the film, have a line item for online and digital marketing? Absolutely, they do. Yeah.
So also she's saying that just as you do a formula for territory by territory for rights, has that popped up enough to make it an impact of a point or a half a point or 2 points when you're putting a budget together? Does someone say the rights are worth something? Has it been quantified as part of the rights package?
I see. The answer is that
I think is that what you're, yeah.
right. Those digital methods of exploitation that you're talking about are bundled up with the rest of the rights when we license territory by territory. So yes, they're within that specific valuation we give to a territory. Very small portion of it, but yeah, they're in there somewhere.
Right.
But right now, not big enough for them to really shift the numbers one way or the
And I
other.
think what's interesting out of this conversation in the last few minutes is they're essential to be in there because they don't want to be caught short and give up something that maybe 5 years from now is a very critical right, a platform that they undervalued. So they're just basically saying all methods, now and invented on Mars,
Right. In a way, it's crazy because after the theatrical rights, which are very immediate, they're probably, in terms of the longevity of the film, they're the second most important means of exploitation. It is the future, to answer our friend's question. It's with us. Digital transmission is the way these films will be out there, but we're all a little vague on what it means.
Yeah. I mean, I don't think people thought that PS3 and Xbox was, at 1 year, nobody ever heard of it as a platform, and then the next year it was, and it's very fast changing. Right here and then in the back, and I think then we'll wrap up. Two questions, and we'll get the hell out of here.
You said something about your association with Reliance, right? Could you shed some more light on that? That with all the revenue streams drying up in US and Reliance being a cash flow kind of a machinery,
right?
Is it making a difference to the content that you're going to create,
Well,
distribute?
that's interesting. The first question is answered simply. Reliance is a major investor, has taken a major stake in your company.
Mm-hmm.
And then I guess the second question is, does that stake in the company, how does that translate into the pictures you green light and produce and sell?
It hasn't influenced our taste in films. They invested in us because of our know-how in effectively the Hollywood and the US entertainment world. So, but there's an interesting point I think you also were alluding to, whether this is part of the landscape now with financing coming from the growth economies in Asia and India and so forth. And the answer is yes. It's a trickle right now. I mean, Reliance have put a very big footprint in Hollywood, more than probably any other Southern Asian or Southeast Asian company. We're starting to see Chinese money come looking for content investment in the US. As of now, they're sort of their baby steps. Obviously, we're aware there's a huge amount of cash and wealth there. And as their distribution landscape evolves, and there's a whole different set of issues there, of course, over and above the technological changes, I think their ability to monetize Hollywood and American content will increase, and I think that's when we'll see their outward investment in our films accelerate, and become maybe one of the dominant investment forms in a film.
Something hopeful. One last question all the way in the back, and we'll call it a wrap.
Hi, my name is Gary Pearl. You sort of touched on it a couple questions ago, but if the studios are doing fewer films and they're kind of the tentpoles and franchises, and there is no more, the new lines and all the mid-range mini studios, and you're now getting the sales agents sort of as a result of that are now becoming in a way what the mini majors were. You're getting the better package projects from the agencies. When the sales agents used to get that next tier, where does that leave the filmmakers? Where do they go to actually fully put together a film if you're overbooked? How would you do it?
If we're overbooked, so what you're talking about is, and I think you described the batting order absolutely right. You have the studios, then there's a tier. I mean, there are mini major distributors, the Relativities and the Weinstein companies and the Summits of this world, and then there's a circle of companies like ours that are financier sellers who are able to make a mid-budget film. After us, after you've knocked on all of those doors, it's hard to make a movie in the teens or above outside of that system, but there's still a very active independent financing community making movies for, I don't know, $10 million or less, and that the money there is still coming really from the same sources it ever did, which is some foreign sales, although the foreign sales market is harder, and private equity, private capital, high net worth individuals, small funds that are looking to place bets on individual
And
movies.
some of those are very personal bets. I mean, that basically, you're making a movie about somebody's grandfather's true story in North Carolina, or there's something that has a Southern theme, and someone's a Civil War aficionado and has more money than sense, or there are a lot of opportunities based upon the peculiarities of someone wanting to be attached to a movie star, a project, a theme, and maybe a good cause. So
Right. Maybe they just want to get into the game and they start off small, but they're the sources for the classic indie film producer, unless you want to go down to the micro budget level and say, let's make this film for $100,000, which is perfectly possible with many kinds of films, in which case people are doing it off their credit cards, again, old school style.
More possible than ever, but the marketing costs have not changed. I think I'm sorry, can I give her one more question?
One quick one. If it's a one-word answer. You haven't answered this one yet. Can we just get a microphone on it, though, if you can, very quickly? I can speak loud. It's just for the video.
For the video.
Sorry, guys.
Speaking to bundling the transmedia component of a production or IDM, whatever you want to call it, what happens when you're getting funding? For example, in Canada, the OMDC has an interactive digital media fund, and it's a grant, and you have $150,000 from the OMDC, and you have another pocket of money coming towards the production of the actual film. And then, so
The question
they're
is taking,
different partners.
I think we're going to have to take the question out in the lobby because it's very complicated.
It is
and
complicated.
Yeah,
Do you
I'm
mind?
sorry, but I
All
already
right.
pushed this too far.
Okay.
I'm a softie. I'm sorry.
All right, thank you.
Did you want to say? I was just going to say quickly that some of these themes will be continued on in our industry programming. We do have a session looking at a rather large territory, China. That session will be on tomorrow at 12 o'clock right here with Patrick Frater from Film Biz Asia and Ryan Kavanagh from Relativity Media, along with and a whole host of delegates. And then looking a session, State of the Industry session on theatrical windows and video on demand, specifically with Ann Thompson of Thompson and Hollywood, John Fithian from the Theatres organisation, Jeff Gilmore from Tribeca Enterprises, and Todd Wagner from 2929 Entertainment. So, yes, please.
Because I'm a man of my word, I want to give you my business card, and if I can't answer it, I'll find someone in the industry almost as smart as Stuart, if that person exists. Okay.
Thanks.
Thank you.